So 2008 Honda Element EX, installing a Pioneer 5200 NEX. This Honda has the 7-speaker system with including the sub woofer. So you order essentially check Crutchfield or check Amazon. Uh, you'll find the recommended, I think it's Maestro uh, wiring harnesses. The first one is this green one, which is, this allows you to connect the auxiliary port here. This connects the auxiliary port to the stereo. All right, and it's not auxiliary in, it's AV in. The source is AV on the stereo. There is an auxiliary port on the back of the stereo that will, if you want to add another mini jack, you can. But just be aware when you're doing some testing, it's AV, not auxiliary, okay, on the stereo. So the next part, this is the main wiring harness here, and so it is, again, pretty straightforward. It's all, color coordinated, right? So yellow to yellow off the back of the stereo. The red is the power, and the blue one, again, like for example, so here's the splice. So there's blue to blue, and then ground. So really straightforward, just follow the colors. I made sure that the wires were all, connecting to the right spot, just digging a little bit deeper into it. Didn't want to mess the connections up. So then this part here is for the subwoofer, another part of the harness. These are all pieces that come within that Maestro kit. Okay, so that goes to the sub on the back of the stereo. And then there is, you may want to order, I did, but I didn't need it. There's another harness here, which is for the antenna. Okay, so the antenna plugs, I believe, into the factory stereo through one of these connections here, this part here. And I think that's correct. My Honda already has an auxiliary, or not an auxiliary, but a separate antenna, and so it already has this part here. I think that's correct, but nevertheless, the antenna is easy to figure out. So the next thing is I installed the access controller here, which allows me to control volume and such, channel mode here. This was a little bit of a process to get set up. The wiring on it is pretty straightforward process. The most difficult wire is the green and white wire that connects to pin number 3 back here off of the harness. And so just to give you an idea, you can see where the splice is. And then this funky tie-in to ground. This is pin 14. I had to actually get a wire, cut a wire that I just sort of had laying around. And so I spliced this into pin number 14 here coming off and back to ground. Okay, so I did have to find a wire on that. I think I did that correct. Everything seems to be functioning, and I just followed the directions to the letter on that, and that was the most difficult in terms of soldering and splicing things in, what have you. So having to cut the wire sheathing. So once I got it hooked up, I started everything up, and it's supposed to automatically recognize your stereo and your system, and it didn't at first. It did some really weird things of increasing the volume just randomly, and the mode wasn't working. So I had to reset it several times, and it was just sort of at a loss. I think I was holding the reset button down too short a time or something. I'm not really sure, but eventually all the lights, the LED lights started flashing correctly, and something started happening, and then it was connected. I don't know what I did, but took me about 30 minutes to sort of figure it out with the reset button, just following the directions. So hopefully it'll go a little bit smoother, but this is the only part that really concerned me through the process. I thought something was going awry, but eventually it recognized and connected. Okay, so the next thing I did was you can pull all of this stuff off, and you start over here. This panel you just pry off, and then there's a bolt under here for this the trim piece here, and then just a little bit of prying will pull it off. And what that gives you access to is sort of hard to see down there, but you can see I've got USB coming out here, and so also I pulled the fuse panel off under here, which gave me greater access. And I cut a hole, just a small hole, in where the seams are in the panel. You'll see it down there, and just to allow the wires to come through without being pinched or crimped. Okay, so I've got 2 USB ports. This USB will connect to the CarPlay, which is functioning right off the bat, and this is the bottom port, which connects to Android. So the top port on the back of the stereo is CarPlay, iPhone, and this is Android. I have 2 USBs because I've already tested this. Put a flash drive in, and it'll recognize the stereo will automatically recognize the playable media that you have on your flash drive, and so it'll come up as USB 2 is the bottom port. All right, and so then once I have all this stuff off, I took this little piece of trim off. Just takes a little bit of force to get it off. Just pull on it. Then I can run the wires, and then you can see back here the microphone, and get a better angle there. I don't know if you can see it. There are 2 wires in there. Those are from the USB. I cut a little bit of a hole there. Otherwise, the trim wouldn't sit flush and wouldn't actually clip back this trim piece here. So yeah, once you get that trim piece off, you can run the wires basically right back over, and they come out there. You'll be able to easily thread the wires through the speedometer here, and then it'll come back through, and then you can connect everything. So I haven't hooked up the satellite XM yet, but that'll be probably the most challenging of the process here, because I am going to have to run a wire from the rear of the car, basically where the antenna sits, all the way up through the side, and then back into the harness here, or back into the dashboard. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do that, but I'll do some research on the web and find out about that. And other than that, it's a pretty straightforward process, and just a lot of wires. It looks more complicated than it actually is, but hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll try to let you know what I know.